That's no moon. It's a space station.
Hey guys, welcome back to the show. Just a few quick things before we get started. Our 4-day disclosure conference is coming up in May 12th through the 15th in Grafton, Illinois. We have 13 speakers this year. It's our 4th year doing it. It's a lot of fun. Tickets are still available. If you want to come hang out, we have 4-day passes, 1-day passes. And if you can't make it in person, we have live stream passes available. All of that information is at journeytotruth.online, and that link is below in the description. It's right around the corner, so grab a ticket and come hang out. We're going to have a blast. We can't wait to see you there. And today, we are excited to be joined by former Master Sergeant Jason Sands. You may recognize him from the Joe Rogan podcast, or more recently, Dr. Sala's interview. And, he's kind of making his rounds in the UFO circuits. You may probably be familiar with his testimony, but we're going to try and go a little deeper and talk about some of the things that he doesn't usually get to discuss because he's telling the main story all the time. And to be honest, some of the interviews I've listened to sound more like interrogations than interviews. And this isn't going to be like that. We believe his story and we want to go deeper and have an actual discussion about this. We're not approaching this as skeptics. So we're really excited to have him join us today and see what we can get into. But before that, I'll let him introduce himself. And Jason, if you don't mind just giving us a brief background of your military experience and how you kind of found your way into this field.
Sure. I joined the Air Force in 1985. My first job was to be a repairman for aircraft. I was an airframe repair specialist. Did that for about 3 years. Then I had to cross train out due to some manning overages in my current or in that repair career field. And when I switched jobs, it was an intelligence job. So that's when I had to get my clearance. They did their background investigation, and I began working in Sembach, Germany as an intel analyst right after that. So had a lot of telecommunications monitoring missions. That was my job to do. It was just a regular thing where we'd go from installation to installation, and we would monitor the telecommunications, assess their security, and then we would debrief the staff, tell them what we found, help them with any vulnerabilities, and then we moved on. And there were about each mission was about 2 weeks long, anywhere between 7 to or more people, like 15 people, depending on the scope of the mission and whether or not we were working 12-hour shifts all day, 24/7 through the whole thing. So that's how I got introduced to telecommunications monitoring and had a clearance given to me. So my next duty station was to go to Nellis Air Force Base. I was stationed there for about 6 years, and of those 6 years, 3 years of those were in the program. The program being, Dreamline program, where they do the reverse engineering, they've got the exotic tech, and all that sort of stuff. That I got introduced to that pretty quick after I got stationed there in 1991, I believe. And then I exited the program in 1994. But anyway, I was doing the same job I did before in Germany. However, they added to me sort of an additional set of responsibilities to do the same thing for the special access program that they introduced me to. So it's primarily using the same equipment that I normally would use. However, there was only 4 people read into the program that were analysts like myself. They were the ones that kind of had an eye on me. There was no paperwork involved in their selection of me, but apparently they liked some of my analytical work because I'd worked with them on other missions. I'd had worked with them on Desert Shield, Desert Storm at CENTCOM, so that I think that's where they kind of saw some of my work and ability to analyze things. So that's when I got introduced. They said I'd have to take a polygraph and have my entire background, looked into with a fine-tooth comb. And I said, yeah, I got nothing to hide. Go ahead. So everything went fine. Next thing I knew, I was flying into Dreamland and taking a base tour with the commander, and it was very exciting times for me. And then I did my 3 years in the mission. Came out of that due mainly because I made a mistake of on one of the missions down to New Mexico. I wanted to bring my wife and kids to the zoo over the weekend because I didn't want to be bored, and I thought it was a good time. And I was newly married and everything else, had a brand new baby and everything else. So I just wanted to be with them, but apparently that was a very taboo thing. Managed to really piss off a lot of people. So they asked me to leave the program, and they actually wanted to kill me at first for what I had done. I didn't realize how severely they looked at that. So that led to some other repercussions. And then I got out of the program. I went into doing my normal job again after I got read out. So I continued telecommunications monitoring. And then as I gained a little bit more rank, they allowed me to go to information operations school. Graduated that and began working as a joint planner in Hawaii. And after Hawaii, I became a superintendent down in Hurlburt Field, Florida, which is where my kids wanted me to go. My choice was either to work in uh, Colorado or Florida. The kids just, after they got done being with me in Hawaii, they thought Florida would be a great place to go because it had kind of the same temperatures and things like that. That's how my Air Force career went. I retired in 2007 honorably as a master sergeant, did 22 years, and was pretty much a defense contractor ever since after that. So that's how it all went.
Wow. Yeah, that's great. So, like I said, we won't make you tell the same story over again like you have on every other interview. But just for the people who don't know, Dreamland is Area 51. That's what you're referring to there, and is that where you encountered the extraterrestrial? Was it on in Area 51 or was that at Nellis?
No, my encounter happened after I actually got read out. I was read out earlier in 1994, and then later that same year, that's when the encounter happened in the desert with this, what I think it was an alien that was working with Dreamland people, personnel or inside the program somehow. And I think he had some kind of a disagreement or an altercation, and that led to him, exiting. So we actually uh, encountered him on the dirt roads when his craft was landed over by Quartz Mountain, which is south and west of Groom Lake or Dreamland.
Okay, I got
So,
you. So, okay, so knowing what you know now and, everything that you shared on the other interviews, we kind of got bits and pieces of what you believe is actually going on. But maybe you could give us like your 40,000-foot view, your elevator pitch of what is happening with the government ET, the joint government ET classified programs and the reality of that world.
well, yeah, just I know you guys are more familiar with my story, so I'm glad I don't have to go over everything. But yeah, just between both my professional work inside the program and my desert encounter, it led me to see certain aspects about the culture that's there in the program, which is kind of what I thought led to some concerns for me because I, when I was doing my telecommunications monitoring inside the program, there were certain calls where they were talking about tall whites, grays, and they were in laboratory environments, and the way they set up these laboratory experiments, the humans were not allowed to even come in when the tall whites or grays were coming in. So that, first of all, meant to me as an analyst that humans, vice these tall whites and grays, we were talking about, different species of beings, or, at least different types of people, so anyway, the other aspect about the laboratory environment that I took as a insinuation or an assumption was that the way that it was handled as well, the way that the things that the tall whites and the grays were involved with is that they didn't really want to touch any of the weapon systems. They only helped in kind of setting up the laboratories and tearing down the stuff. Because as you know, when you're testing equipment and you're looking at radar signatures or cloaking or any other types of things that you might have a technology you're wanting to test, the more pristine your data is, the better off you are in finding out that is this the right angle for this part of the aircraft or weapon system, and so on and so forth. So this is what the aliens or tall whites and grays were doing, was trying to silence all the junk noise and data that might be coming into the lab so that they would get a really good test when the humans came in. So they were just mainly helping out with that. So what that led me to believe was that this is not a free-for-all. It was a very controlled environment where the tall whites and the grays did not want to, I guess, get involved in the weapon system itself. So that told me that there's a little bit of, tension there with them even participating. However, it also made me think, well, there's still something that these tall whites and grays are getting out of this deal. I mean, they're in the laboratory. They are indeed helping. They're just refusing to help with the weapon systems. So there's some, and that to me, as an analyst, that there's some kind of an agreement there. And so that's what my conclusion would be, just from my experience when it comes to if there's interaction on these technologies. So I've had people challenge me on, what is a tall white, what is a gray, are these code words for other scientists? And I'm like, no, that's not what they're saying. These actually were talked about as being a group of tall whites and a group of grays and a group of humans, like they were all different people. And besides that, the code name conventions they use in the military are not like tall white and gray. They would never name them that.
Right. So, and if I'm not mistaken, the alien that you encountered in the desert, didn't he make a comment, like a derogatory comment towards the people at Dreamland? Can you repeat that?
Yeah. Yeah. So I've had a lot of my friends that were intel analysts also. I shared my story on a classified network before I was able to download it as an unclassified event, and use that as my public speaking pieces. But as I was going through that storyline about how everything chronologically went through, the question came up is, why was he there? Why was he wearing a uniform that looked like ours? All these sorts of things. So yes, to get to your question though, is that at a certain point, he did have a derogatory made a derogatory comment about considering the people in Dreamland or Grim Lake as being murderers and barbarians, and that's what he felt. So that's what I had to go off of, is that he'd had some kind of a negative experience with them, and then we were left as intel analysts looking at that and theorizing, well, why would he be out of Groom Lake? Why would he be kind of angry or upset with the people that work there? And why is his craft needing repair? So we kind of came to the best theory that kind of fits all of that. And on top of that, why was he wearing a military uniform? After we talked about it, the scenario seemed to be maybe he was working in the program as one of the workers there, and he got in an altercation with somebody who was working there. And when he got in the craft and tried to leave, he was shot at, and it damaged his craft. And that was why he was there. That's why he needed help, and also why he was wearing the uniform, was that he was actually working in the program. So maybe they issue uniforms for folks that work with the humans to help fit in, I guess, or something. And those are the kind of things that I settled up on, and the other intel analysts thought, that's probably the best scenario or theory about why he was there.
Right. Are you familiar with what's his name?
Hall.
Charles Hall, his testimony with the tall whites?
Yes, his Millennial Hospitality book. Yes, and I've watched his video from beginning to end. Yeah, I feel he is telling the truth because he mentions certain things about his job, the position as the weather man or the weather station person, and all that stuff. I was told the same thing from the base commander when he gave me the base tour, that his position was allowed to walk wherever they wanted on the range in Groom Lake. Um, and Yeah, I can verify that that is truthful, and that's something or a piece of information nobody would know unless you worked there. So I can verify that that alone convinced me
Right.
because I was like, this guy had to have worked on that or at that weather station that's right there at Groom Lake.
Right. Okay. So I'm going to put you on the spot here. You said in a previous interview there are things that people aren't ready to hear about, as far as, I guess the audiences that you were speaking to on those interviews.
Yeah.
Is there something that you haven't shared as far as what's actually going on, the bigger picture that you would like to share or you can share?
Well, I think what happened was, that space that you're talking about was in December, and I got kind of attacked in the middle of it. I was trying to just tell people and respond to people about, I try to honestly respond. However, some of the people didn't want to believe it, couldn't believe it, and not only did they not want to believe me, because I don't care if you believe me or not, but they started getting really rude and all that stuff. So I know that's what you're talking about. So I was kind of thankful when Jake Barber came forward because I knew him, I knew about him and what his participation in the program was the year before. And I actually had a hand in getting him through Congress and becoming a whistleblower. I'm really proud of him for what he's done. Um, but if you think about what I said in December and what Jake Barber has said since, not that I want to drag, Jake into this, but he would probably agree that it's a bit messy when it comes to retrievals. We've had people say that they've actually had altercations with people that retrieve the craft when they are crashed and they're retrieving them. We've had our own Army soldiers in altercations with them as well, and even death threats levied at our own troops because they're. I think one of them said that they were going to kick uh, Herrera. I think right out the chopper if they wanted to, and nobody would say anything or even find their body. That kind of stuff. So these people really feel like they're above the law. And not only that, it's obvious they are very um, bent on getting their treasure whenever they can, and their treasure being, retrieved, or not aircraft, but spacecraft or UAP, and their pilots and biologics.
So when you say altercations, is that between different like private factions, like
Yep.
classified sectors, clandestine groups?
Yeah, Jake alluded to that as well. I think he mentioned that they were trying to get a barrel that had some or a container of some kind that had some hard drives in it that he had to retrieve and he had to find and retrieve. And in that rendition of his story, he does describe that you have to be on your toes. There may be altercations. And in that particular retrieval of these hard drives, he mentions there were other groups. There was at least one other group out there trying to find it too. So it's kind of like a race to get to those hard drives. And yeah, he's probably he could be very seriously telling you that this is kind of messy. It's like a treasure hunt a lot of times where first come first serve. Just like when you're a gold miner, you strike gold. All the other gold miners around you want to kill you for it before you can get to the bank and cash it in. And that's kind of what's going on with these retrievals. They're high value assets to get. They're highly valuable for both reverse engineering purposes and the biological material and things like this. So yeah, they are. It's kind of a very much like a pirates game. Uh, you know, highly mercenary involved, highly trained killers a lot of times. Um, and stuff like that. Just like Jake said, I am the boogeyman. Yes, those are the kind of people that get involved in this sort of work. So if you take all that into context between what I was starting to allude to back in December and I got lambasted, And what Jake Barber has said, we're kind of saying the same thing. There's a messy part to all of this. There is dirty work to all of this.
Mm-hmm.
And that's putting people's lives in danger, but they're signing up and signing contracts, or they're being forced for one reason or another to produce this mercenary work and become cannon fodder for, maybe a gunfight trying to get at some of this material. So that's what I don't think the public's quite ready to hear all of that, because they've been so wrapped up in just believing if this is something that's real or not, whether these shiny craft and orbs are real or not. And they can't even get past that, let alone, the reality of what's actually happening.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, that's where people are hung up. It's like, there's this cognitive dissonance there. And in one of your interviews, I can't remember his name off the top of my head, you mentioned even hearing something about Ashtar Command, and immediately they were like, "Oh, we can't go there. That's speculation," and change the subject. And
Yeah.
Ashtar Command shows up in ufology, right? I mean, it's
Mhm.
just there. There's books written about it, whatever. So the fact that you overheard that, like, why write that off and call it speculation when we have a lot of data points that point to that being something very real. And I don't know if you have any information on that, but maybe you could share where you heard that.
Yeah. That was again while I was on mission, and the name Ashtar Command came up. And I remember distinctly asking one of my friends who were there, one of the other three guys that were with me, and I said, "Do we have a base or a command or a headquarters in India or Asia somewhere?" And they're like, "No, why?" And I said, they just referred to Ashtar Command like it was somebody they deal with on a regular basis." And they're like, "Here, let me listen to that." So they listened to it, and they were all puzzled about it too. None of us, back then, Ashtar Command was not really a big UFO thing, or maybe they mentioned it in a few books here and there, but none of us had heard that term before. And yeah, we all thought about that, and thought about even if we could report on it, because we really didn't have a lot of information other than the fact that it was an organization of some kind that these program people were dealing with to do their work. Um, so that was very humbling when later on I did have people talk to me about Ashtar Command from the UFO community many years later. And I was like, wow. So, I'm like, yeah, I've heard this before. And now I'm starting to wonder, okay, well, what is this? So I'm asking these people that have done some research on Ashtar Command, and I'm reading through there, and it's supposed to be some kind of a technical exchange, or some kind of a exchange of information between this not galactic, but I guess this organization or body of other intelligence beings around here in the Milky Way galaxy, that they they do come to Earth. They don't do it bold-facedly, but they meet with certain people, like the people in the program, to see what our progress is and see if there's something they can offer us.
Yeah.
So when I heard that, I was like, well, gosh, that kind of jives with what I knew about the labs, that, yeah, that may be part of the agreement that they have with Ashtar Command, um, and so on and so forth. So, yeah, it kind of started to fit in with some of my analytical work. And I was like, wow, that's a possibility now. So, yeah, Ashtar Command is a real word that I heard on the mission, so I can verify that.
Yeah.
So, what exactly it was, they didn't describe it as much as these people years later, had told me. I didn't know any of that. And I can't verify that, but these other people that have heard from other witnesses, that's what they're saying this Ashtar Command does. Is it's some kind of an interface between the higher intelligence in our galaxy and us. They're kind of watching us, and they're helping us, and they're trying to, get us to continue our growth.
Yeah. That
That's all I know about it.
yeah, I mean, that was a great summary and a great analysis, I believe. Aaron, did you have any questions for him before I jump into the next thing here?
Hmm. I have a question. Before you joined the military, have you had a history of UFO contact at
Yeah,
all, or anything? Okay. Do you
yeah,
mind?
it's followed my family around. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it started very early on, when I was 4 or 5, maybe even earlier, but I can't verify it. I was too young. But 4 or 5, yeah, I did have a run-in with um, a pedophile. That was when I was over in England. I was a little boy. That's where I was born. And this gentleman was going to, you know, do his nasty on me. But once he knocked me to the ground, I lost. I couldn't move, and I lost my ability to see, but I could hear, and I was aware of things around me. And somebody came to my rescue. So he got the guy off me, and the guy got scared. He ran off, and this person who I thought was a bobby or a police officer, they call them bobbies in England.
Mhm.
But anyway, I thought it was a bobby, and had seen it or seen me getting hurt, and wanted to help. So anyway, he picks me up and asked me where I lived, and I told him, yeah, 44 Saxon Road, just around. I was nearly home when this happened, but so it was just up and around the corner. I noticed when he did pick me up, he was very strong. It was almost like I was a paperweight to him, where he just, literally just
Yep.
picked me up with it. Anyway, so he gets me to my front door, and I'm like, "Sir, I can't see." And he touched me on my temple, my right temple, or my left temple rather, and all of a sudden, I had a little bit of a blurry vision, but my vision started coming back, and I could see it was not a police officer or a bobby. It was a platinum-haired, blue-eyed person who didn't stand very much taller than me. Um, he very much looked like an adult, and he had this sort of a grayish silver uh, jumpsuit with a wide sash around his waist. And I didn't get in the door, but he just opened the door, which should have been locked. And I don't know how he did that, but he just opens the door, and he just says, "Your vision will be perfect in a while." And I was just really thankful when I was telling him, "Thank you so much, thank you." He was like, "No problem. I'm glad we were here, that we could, help you." So anyway, I had a splitting headache, and I just went inside, and I was just very thankful that I'd been saved, and laid down on the couch, waiting for my nana to come home, or my mother. I can't remember who came home first, because my mother was an RN at the time, and sometimes she would work late, and sometimes my nana would be the first one I would see. So anyway, they came in, either my nana or my mother, and gave me a ice pack for my head and all that kind of stuff to make my headache go away. And I slept a lot that day. So anyway, the following day is when it really gets curious, because they returned and they wanted to check up on me. So a knock came on the door, and my mother answered the door this time. And I went, I got up from the table where I think I was either drawing or, you know, whatever. There was like a little dining room table off to the side. So anyway, I walked to the window, the front window, so I could see who was knocking on the door. And it was the people that or the guy that had saved me, but there's this other guy standing there, and he looks a lot like him. They could have been like brothers or almost twins. They both had platinum hair and blue eyes, great gray suits, with the sash. And I could hear them talking to my mother, and I went back to go sit down. Um, and my mother's just trying to entice them in to say, "Oh, thank you for helping Jason out." And he had a really bad bump on the head, and they're like, "Is he okay?" And she's like, "Yes, yes." She's like, "Come in and have some tea. Have some tea." And they're like, "No, no, we don't have time for that." And so she was very insistent with them. So they remained on the porch, and then she went back thinking they were going to follow her in. So she left the door open, and she went to go make some tea, because she was like, "Damn it, I'm going to give them tea. They helped my son yesterday." So anyway, she goes back to the door, after she puts the tea out on the table, and she knows they're gone. They're just gone. And so they disappeared again, and nobody knows, where they went. And the street is very long. Yeah, there's a turn that could have gone around, I guess, if they'd walked quickly enough or whatever. But she just felt like they had kind of disappeared on her, and they didn't come in and have tea. So she remembers that very well. So it's not just me testifying to this. I'm probably going to write a book and have my mother describe some of these experiences, because she was there for at least two of them, two of the major events of my life. But anyway, ends up, here's this another strange part, is these two gentlemen show up later when I'm 10 years old, after I've had my UFO experience in San Jose, California. So this follows me from England all the way up to San Jose, California. And this is when my mother, she had a really rough time with my dad, and he wanted some separation. So he had just signed up for a tour over in Vietnam, and he wanted her to have a house in California, and he was planning on probably divorcing her later because they just weren't getting along. So he didn't help out much. We had very little food. We didn't have any furniture when we first got there. Yes, the house was pretty much all that my dad gave us, really, and paid for. But the rest was all on my mother's head. And she had to work like 3 jobs just to get by. Sometimes we only had like a package of hot dogs to go for a whole week for us. And she had to feed me and my 2 sisters. So it's not very good times, very poor, very tough. Anyway, so these guys show up again during this early onset of this hardship time with us in San Jose. And they came to the door and they speak to my mother. And it was very protective, very spiritual, like it was before, because there was always this sort of feeling of peacefulness whenever they showed up. So anyway, they talked to her about some really strange things that she still remembers, because they're mainly interested in talking to her about, well, are you okay? And they even said stuff like, do you believe in God? So I thought that was kind of interesting as well. But these are the things that she remembers they talked to her about. But again, she said these were the same 2 gentlemen, identical to the people that we had seen in England. However, instead of just having their suits on, they had these strange sort of blue or purplish looking rain jackets with their hoods up. But after that visit, every week we had groceries dropped at our doorstep. And we thought it was maybe one of the neighbors. So we went around the whole neighborhood and nobody confessed to it and leaving us any kind of groceries. They just started showing up. So it could have been them, or it could have been a neighbor that just didn't want to confess to doing it. So there's 2 experiences, and with these platinum-haired, blue-eyed beings. So I thought, they kind of sounded like Nordics, but they were both about the same height. They weren't much taller than me when I was 10 years old, so they couldn't have been more than about 4'5" or 5 foot tall. So they're kind of short, but they look like adults. Very much like an elf would look if you were, but they didn't have pointy ears. So it's kind of strange. But yeah, that's some of the stuff that followed me around when I was a kid. And my mother can also identify with that.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
That's
It's
amazing.
beautiful that if they were the ones bringing you groceries, that's an incredible story.
Yeah.
Yeah, it shows some of their compassion for us. Why they chose my family, I've been told, for me, it's a mystery. I don't feel like I'm special or anything. However, other people say that because I'm maybe partly Native American, Indian, Native Americans blood in me from my father's side. Um, and that seems to follow people, that are from First Nation people that are in the tribes and stuff.
Right.
But yeah, that's part of the history. So maybe that's what attracts them, or maybe they're kind of like what the Bible's talking about, because talking about God with my mother, maybe they are kind of like guardian angels of some kind, or the watchers that people
Mhm.
have said that, yeah, these are the people that actually are extraterrestrials, and show up in our ancient texts.
Yeah. Or
Yeah,
yeah, I
absolutely.
would say all the above is possible, and it's even possible that they have some sort of timeline technology, or they knew the important role you would be playing in disclosure today, right now, and they want to make sure that you were taken care of and that you stayed on that path, right? So, I mean, things can happen in your reality where, like, they'll make subtle nudges to something in your life that will steer you in a certain direction that will, place you somewhere where maybe they know that you're going to thrive in that area, right? So something along those lines could have occurred.
And protect you, like the
And
the pedophile,
right,
they're
Right.
like, "Oh, we gotta protect him here, otherwise that will completely take you off course,"
Hmm.
thing.
So, okay, I'm going to go backwards a little bit to you were talking about the altercations between different groups, retrieving these UFOs. Have you heard of any altercations of humans with extraterrestrials? Because I know that there's this like, tagline going around you've been coined as the alien assassin. So, maybe you can share, what that was and help us understand.
Well, it goes along with what I said about it's a bit messy when it comes to retrievals. If you could imagine that not everything that goes on our Earth, whether it's extraterrestrial, um, it leaves their agendas an open field of what the heck is going on. I'm convinced by what I know, both being on mission and also having my encounters with them, that there's good and bad. Okay. So the way I look at it is that, yes, I had to do some dirty work for the program because I screwed up. I brought my kids on a mission and I shouldn't have. So they kind of forced me into doing conscripted labor for them. But yeah, sometimes there's peoples that come to Earth that are quite deadly. They don't have good intentions, or they're in a survival mode and they want to get away from us. And they're shooting back, or they're making it difficult, or they want to kill us before we kill them. So all these kinds of things can happen. And that's what I'm referring to, is that the reality of this is what I'm not talking about, because, like, again, I don't think the public wants to know about all that. And I don't want to overshadow the good that's going on as well, because I don't want people to, latch into this ugly part of the whole program as being the only thing they talk about. You mean, yeah, it's fascinating, but we need to put it in its place. This is the part that we want to resolve. We don't want to see this anymore. That's why I'm a whistleblower. These are some of the concerns I've got, that there's other things going on that I haven't even told Congress, because I know they're not ready to hear about all of this. I'm glad Jake Barber is starting to do that. So hang in a minute. There we go. Sorry, I winked out there. Somebody's trying to make a phone call. Anyway, so that's kind of what I'm referring to. It's just that there's this dark side to the program. Is that there's a bit of real need for some mercenary work, because all of these endanger us. Apparently, some of the things that I got involved with, there seemed to be some aliens that were taking human hostages and maybe seeking to enslave them, as they did in old days, like the Anunnaki did, where they even there's stories of them manufacturing our DNA and, messing with it just so that they could make us slaves. Um, all of that stuff might be a firm reality. And these are the things that, again, we can't even talk about intellectually until we get to a certain point on, okay, we're through. We already know that these beings and these craft are definitely another civilization. We need to get beyond that to where we can talk about all the other parts of it that perhaps the government can finally, resolve some of the issues that are going on. But they're not going to get there until we get through with some disclosure, so that they can get in there, declassify things like Luna is trying to do, and Elon Musk is trying to do. We're trying to figure out where all this money's gone. And until we get a good hold on that, it's going to be difficult for people to really dig in, because, as Jake has alluded to, there are private industries that are involved that's going to require a lot of legal things to have to take place if we're ever going to investigate, fully,
Right.
and get them to come clean. I'm hoping they come clean of their own accord, because it's probably in their best interest to do so. Because if they do have this technology, which I know they do, then I know that also it's been very heavily military for the whole thing, and or for the whole time that they've been working with them. So we need to get beyond all of that, and figure out that how do we get in and get these private industry people to share their technology for, like, good human things rather than military weapons. And that would open up a lot of. So I've always been trying to, when I have a talk with people like yourselves, and do an interview, I'm like, this is kind of, I'm trying to get to a win-win situation where they can make more profit by coming clean. And yeah, they're going to have to share the patents with other private industry. Maybe they're kind of doing a little bit of that already, but they don't have to do it on the down low all the time. And they don't have to spend so much money hiding and deceiving and all these things that cost lots of money, and getting security for this and security for that. If they could just be a little bit more free about that. So I see there's a win-win there for them. And then the win-win for us is that, yeah, we finally get this closure, and that finally the government itself says, yes, we have been working with them. We can't tell you everything, which I think everybody would be fine with and understand. But, at least we get the truth that, yes, we've been trying to keep this undercover for a while, but no, we're not alone. I think that would be the win-win for everybody. I see both sides winning. So that's where I'm headed. That's what I try to talk about, is try to find that middle ground so that everybody has a place to land.
Yeah, and I think that's beautiful. And I know like there's a Whistleblower Protection Act. I mean, is that directly impacting you and allowing you to come forward, or is
Well, yes, legally, yes. Well, at each level of my legal walk through this, yeah, the NDAA provides for certain protections. Arrow also has certain authority and protections as well. And then filing an official inspector general complaint also provides that legal protection. And then the final thing I had to do was my pre-publication as to, I want to go public. So here's the things I want to talk about. Do you approve? And pretty much they approved everything except the name of one location.
Right. So that's great that actually is occurring. We hear about that stuff, but it's we have firsthand testimony now that it's directly you're involved with that, and now here you are blowing a whistle on this stuff, and you feel safe doing so. So that's important.
Yeah.
When you talk about this mercenary work, I mean, we very much are familiar with that just from other people we've interviewed. We're all familiar with the Phil Schneider testimony whenever they were, boring out the tunnel and they came into a cavern. It was basically an ET base, and there was an altercation. There was a gunfight, and he shared that story, and unfortunately he didn't survive telling that story. But are you referring to like underground mercenary work as far as like clearing out like a tunnel network, ETs that live underground, or is this something just, during crash retrievals?
Yes, I've been in tunnel systems underneath the ground in some of the places I had to monitor for telecommunications security and vulnerabilities. But the places that the dirty work was, it felt like it was above ground or elsewhere. Like it was very cold a lot of times where I ended up being, but I did not feel like it was underground at all. It was not like that. But it was usually at nighttime. They were very dark, that kind of thing.
Right. And go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say it was very controlled as well. It was like something was telepathically telling me and the other people what to do and what to expect next. And then that was how it was operated. So there may have been some sort of an NHI presence there or some way that they were kind of communicating on a conscious level or a telepathic level, just like, our Army guys go out with the radios and their helmets and all that good stuff. But maybe they have some kind of technology where they can talk to you directly into your head. That's what it felt like, is that that it was kind of almost like step by step. They would, tell you, go to the cave entrance, get your gun ready, blah, 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 you're going to turn left and all this kind of good stuff. That's kind of how it went.
Oh, wow. So it wasn't actually a direct order from a superior. It was just something in your.
Yeah, it was very, very silent. The team that I worked on had about 4 people, maybe sometimes more, depending on what was going on. But it was mainly 4 people that I remember. And that's the way that we just never talked, really. We just knew what to do. It just seemed like all of us had something prompting us to do this, do that.
Did you ever experience missing time whenever this was happening?
Yeah, definitely. I would wake up very tired on the evenings when these things would occur. Sometimes I'd have scratches I couldn't couldn't figure out, and or hurts. Like I'd be waking up with my chest and my whole chest, my rib cage for a long time. After I'd been in an altercation, that it hurt for a good 2 weeks or more, and I had that kind of stuff happening. So yeah, it was kind of very I don't know how to put it, a very traumatic point in my life, because I didn't want to be doing it, but I knew that I had to do this for the program. Otherwise, I was going to get a bullet in the head and get buried in the desert somewhere.
Wow. So have you heard any scuttlebutt about like the secret space program and the 20 and back type of stuff? Are you familiar with that?
Yeah, I've heard of people talk about the Galactic Federation, I guess. I remember Galactic being part of a conversation on the mission. I didn't relate it to a Galactic Federation or anything else like that, or fleet or whatever. I may be mistaken or not remembering it properly, but yeah, the term galactic was mentioned a few times. Um, and again, after I got out of the program, that's when other people started to tell me what their rendition of it was, that it's this fleet of spacecraft that go out and take care of things in space, and kind of what I was telling you about,
Right.
kind of doing work out there. So who knows? I can't verify that fully. I know that the term 20 and back was never mentioned to me. I remember distinctly being on what they called a terminal team, uh, and that was what I did. That was it. They had other teams that came out with us, but they were not the ones that had to go in there and do the same thing I had to do. Sometimes they were there to clean up or pick up, debris or whatever else was there. But it was like they just only used you for one little purpose, and then you got back out, and they'd extract you and just take you back.
So a lot of times you wouldn't even have full memory of what you did, or
Right. Yeah. Because I remember actually getting out of the craft or whatever it was, maybe a helicopter. I don't know. But anyway, I remember getting out of the craft, being, in one location. And it was just then that I became consciously aware that, okay, I'm going towards that cave entrance. And then on the backside, when I came out of the cave, everything goes black. I don't know what happened after that. Kind of a thing. Very fuzzy. I remember walking back towards um, a door that was coming, and it was on a craft of some kind. There was no light, really. So it was very hard to tell what kind of craft it was that I was getting back into. But then at that point, it was like somebody shut me down and I couldn't remember.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, that's unfortunately common amongst some of the, testimonies out there, this missing time aspect and being used for these covert missions and
Memory
however
wiped.
yeah, mind wipes, however that works, and it's the reality of the situation is that the technology exists, and whether or not this is like NHI intervention, ET intervention, or human military just reverse engineered this technology and using it on their own people, I mean, it would probably be a little bit of both. But like as far as like the weapon systems and stuff that you remember using, did anything seem advanced to you? Did it seem like alien technology?
Well, yeah, the rifle definitely. I mean, I've always been around guns because my dad was a Green Beret and had me learn what guns were very early on in life. So I'm used to the weight, how to load, reload, and all that good stuff. Get your ammo down range. But this rifle that they handed me, or that was I had my, had it was definitely not normal. It was very lightweight. It was much longer than like a high powered rifle. It's probably got about another foot or so to it on the barrel length. And when you pull the trigger and I shot it, there was no recoil. But apparently, whatever kinetic energy or projectile came out of it, man, that stuff it'd leave a tiny hole in the front end, but the back it would just blow out and destroy whatever it on the backside. It was just like an explosion. So yeah, it did definitely seem like it was a different kind of a weapon that I'd never seen before. It looked more like a rail gun, a small version of a rail gun that had very highly kinetic projectiles that could shoot out of it. And that's kind of what it seemed to me. So yeah, they weren't normal. They looked enough like a gun, and a rifle to where you were like, okay, I get what this is, and you don't have to describe to me that this is the trigger and all that good stuff. And it did have a butt that you could put up to your shoulder, but it was just mainly to aim, not because you don't have to worry about the recoil. So yeah, it was pretty much just like it was just a very lightweight gun, but it did all this damage.
Were there other countries involved in any of these missions, or were you just on teams of strictly U.S.
It was
American?
U.S. I'd say U.S. Yeah, yeah. I didn't
Right.
work with anybody that I thought was from another nation or whatever.
Were you ever on a mission in another country or another continent?
Quite possibly, they could have taken me literally anywhere on these things. Because, like I said, there's that missing time, and you're kind of becoming conscious just as you're getting ready to exit, and that kind of a thing. So yeah, it was very difficult to ascertain exactly where these things happened, unless there was some kind of a no kidding indicator, or I had a moment where I could, get my bearings and stuff. I'm gonna have to get my charger.
Oh, okay. No worries.
So, but yeah, that's kind of how it went. So yeah, that's how I would describe it.
So whenever you were brought in this program, I guess you were being reprimanded, and you were okay. Well, since you're not going to obey orders or whatever you did that pissed them off, this is whenever you started experiencing these missing time missions and stuff like that. Did you ever Did you ever consent to it, or this is just something that they said you had to do?
No, what happened was when I got read out because they were, I'd screwed up, and what happened that day was my other three analysts that were with me on my teams, they they just said, okay, we're going to Indian Springs. So we went to Indian Springs for the debrief. That's where they um, wanted me to go to do the debrief. So I did that, and they told me stay in the car. And they're very adamant about me staying in the car. I guess they knew the gravity of what I had done. So anyway, they went inside this building. And gosh, it must have been like over half an hour or maybe an hour had passed to where they finally came back out, and I was like, okay, so how'd it go? And then one of them says, they wanted to kill you, Jay. And I'm like, ho, yeah, I bet they did. And he's like, no, they literally wanted to kill you, Jason. And I was like, really? I was like, that bad? And he's like, yeah, that bad. And they didn't want to talk about it anymore. And then about a week later, they took me up range near Talicha Peak. And that's when I found out that they literally were introducing me into this program as penance for getting me out of trouble. This was the other option, and I think it was mainly because they didn't know if I was going to survive or not. I could get killed. So I think whoever I pissed off, they thought this was a better option to use me like a mercenary, because they knew I was, I had a background in martial arts. My dad's Green Beret, so I was a pretty tough guy. Had to grow up with violence in the house, that kind of thing. Um, so they knew I knew how to fight and everything. So um, I guess they thought this would be a good idea. And at first I was resistant, and eventually just said, you don't understand, Jay. If you don't do this, you'll never see your wife and kids again. You understand that, right? And I'm like, it just broke me down. And I was like, crap. So I just bowed my head, cried about it for a while. And then I just said, all right, let's just get this done. And that's when it all started.
Wow. That's unfortunate, but I mean, it's a great testimony to help people understand what happens, what's going on here. Like, this is the magnitude of the situation. And, a lot of times you sign up for a program, or you join the military with nothing but the best intentions. And
Yeah.
it's not until you're all the way in, years down the line, that you might realize that you're involved in and even a criminal organization sometimes. I mean, it just really isn't as black and white as many people would like to believe.
Right.
And I understand when you say, like, not everyone's ready to hear about this.
Right. It's a reality to the program that only people that have been in there know about. But if you think about it, everything I've told you, I've tried to bring to you in a layman's terms and get you to understand that this actually is, logical the way that they do these things, because you're talking about a very clandestine program. They're messing with highly dangerous, risky threats, and doing things that even amongst ourselves um, can end up being very risky to each other in the private companies. Because if you get these private companies both hiring two different teams of mercenaries to go do a retrieval or whatever, yeah, there can be some real clashes and people get hurt. And that's where you get some of these stories from people like Herrera saying that, yeah, they threatened me, Um, and yeah, it's very much a reality. Let me put it that way. If you can get past all of the golly gee whiz, we've been lied to all these years, um, and realize that this might have some real implications. That everything I've said and everything Jake Barber said, hopefully everybody can see that it rings true. There's a logic to it. You can see
Well,
why we have to operate this way under these restrictions, and it's mainly because of the secrecy of the program and what they're doing. So that's another thing that we're going to have to surmount as well when it comes to disclosure, is they've been doing this for many years now. And I'm sure there's a lot of people that'll have problems with it in the way that they've conducted themselves. However, I think that the people that are involved in it are very few. Um, and those are the kind of things that we're just going to have to deal with as we get through all the declassification. And hopefully that they finally come out and they say, yeah, this is a program. Yeah, we've been doing some things, and this is how we feel like we wanted to do business because of what we've been through. I'm sure they all can back up how they went through their decision process, and this is why we still think it's a threat, and all those kinds of reasonings and stuff like. So yeah, they'll have to we'll have to finally have that discussion. Let me put it that way. We'll have to have that discussion and figure out, was it right, wrong, indifferent, whatever.
mhm. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great analysis. So, I mean, I think that's what's happening. Absolutely, that is what's happening. And it's they're trying to disclose this stuff. They're trying to figure out a way to tell the public about what's been going on without telling on themselves. So they're like walking this tightrope right now.
Right.
And eventually, so it's just gonna have to somebody else is gonna have to blow the whistle on it because they're not gonna do it themselves. And so
Yeah, I can't do it myself, and neither. Well, Jake and me, I guess you're getting closer to all this other stuff that goes on, um, and hopefully that opens the door a little bit, puts a crack in the door at least to some of the discussion, and maybe later on, like I said, maybe we can finally get to a point where we can discuss it more openly, and then we can talk about all the details about how everything went down and why Jake ended up doing what he was doing, how I ended up doing what I was doing, all that kind of stuff can finally come out, and maybe some more whistleblowers will feel comfortable and say, yeah, they kind of screwed me over too, and this is what they made me do, and this needs to stop, or we need to think this through. I want to make sure that what I did was right or wrong or indifferent. That's what I want to do, is get to that point where we can actually have a discussion.
mhm. Yeah,
But it's not going to happen today. And even if we get disclosure today, we can't talk about this stuff because it's going to be too far fetched for even Congress, because they're going to want something they can go forward with, a team to investigate with. And right now, they're just going to have enough trouble trying to get to the fact that the program exists and what are they doing.
right. I mean, there's a phrase I've heard, a saying I've heard, that the truth is so outlandish that it'll debunk itself amongst the skeptics, because people just won't register when they hear about some of this stuff if they haven't been climatized.
Yeah.
So
That's why the way I've always viewed disclosure is like, um, it'd be great if government were to tell us the truth, but why do we need the government to tell us something we already know? So if we can get enough of humanity to already know that this stuff is true, already be like, yeah, of course, or
Mhm.
somehow having their own contacts, or
Exactly.
then you don't need the government to tell you what you already know. And then the government becomes irrelevant in that respect of like, and then hopefully those types of people end up becoming the government. And then we can actually have a government that serves its population rather than one that basically
Perfect.
takes advantage of its population and weaponizes things against it, which is what we've had for a long time, unfortunately. Right.
Hmm.
And then these technologies that we've had for 100+ years, like Stephen Greer's always talking about, now we can actually use it to benefit humanity rather than weaponizing it against humanity and then trying to be like, no, there's a scary threat out there that we need to, use all our resources and money to defend against rather than being like, well, yeah, there are, like you said, there are good and bad ETs. It's a
Yep.
whole spectrum, but we can still protect ourselves while using the same technologies to benefit
Hmm.
and have everyone aware that this stuff exists and serve the population rather than keeping everyone in the dark, weaponizing it
Exactly.
against people, all this nonsense that needs to stop, right?
Yeah, it's pretty much what I feel as well, because I think all we're really asking government to do for disclosures, have you been lying to us, and ask and actually tell, yeah, we lied to you. Finally, but
Mhm.
they've been doing, weapons development off of all of this. So it's really on us what we do with it after that. Um, and I think the people are ready for that kind of revelation. And I think that there's also a reassurance in the fact that obviously, we're still a race on this planet. That means that the majority of the NHI are what Dr. Greer describes as being good. However, there are some bad things that happen for one reason or another. And those are the things that I think maybe even our NHI are cleaning up with us. And maybe that's what I touched base with, doing some of that kind of dirty work for the program. And that's how maybe I was being manipulated throughout the mission each time I would deploy on those missions. And that's maybe it was a telepath that was an NHI that was doing all of that, because this is the way they prefer maybe me to go in and do the dirty work for them, but they were going to telepathically give me an edge by just kind of like, preparing my mind without all the trimmings of, like going through all the processes of, spreading out and fanning out. It's like, okay, you go left, you go right, and all this other good stuff. I see too, all that good stuff that you don't have to use all those signalings and other things that you're doing, and how you, set up your defense, and you're always got your buddy's cover that's in front of you, and you're doing all that good stuff. Anyway, all that being said, uh, the telepathy was just very straightforward, just very matter of fact. I think if that was what was going on, it might touch on what we're talking about here. Is that, yeah, there might be some involvement here with the NHI where they are protecting us, and they may have been doing that for many years, um, beyond even the program being established. They may have been doing this, since ancient days. It seems like there's a big lull in the ancient text where it says that, when Christ was born, it seems like all the crap that happened before, whether it's the pantheon of gods from India or Egypt and all these other gods with a little g, there seems to be an end to that right around that same time when Christ is supposed to have been born, and now there's this lull of
Mhm.
non-involvement,
Right.
or at least not overt involvement. But prior to that, yeah, you've got even biblical uh, figureheads like Abram
Mhm.
being visited in his own tent and sitting down and having dinner with these beings. He calls them sons of God, which is different from sons of man. One's a human, the other one's considered an angel of some kind. Um, and so that's what even in the Bible is described. So they're eating real food with one of the main figureheads of a biblical character. So you've got that. And to me, those are all eyewitness accounts, people that actually interface with these beings, because if life is possible, I think our pattern of life here is not that rare. I think that it permeates everything around us. I think we're all from the same pool of uh, ingredients. Let me put it that way. And that, where there's water, there's fish. Where there's air, there's birds. On the ground, there's all the four-legged and two-legged beasts, and all that is the same. everywhere you go. There might be modifications, but in general, we all look pretty much the same, which actually jives with eyewitness accounts saying most of this is humanoid. Head, torso, arms, feet. Sometimes more fingers, sometimes less. Sometimes bigger eyes. Sometimes you've got extremes on one end. Maybe there's tentacles, or they look like an insect of some kind, like a mantid. So you've got all these different flavors, but they're all generally of a body type that's kind of the same.
Yep. Yeah, the 5-star figure. I mean,
Yeah.
And what you encountered yourself in the desert was a humanoid extraterrestrial with a
Yeah,
light blue skin that you spoke telepathically with.
exactly.
And so the telepathy is nothing that you were ever taught either. That was just like you were just suddenly able to do it in the presence of them.
Right. As soon as he started telepathically talking to me, it was like a very natural feeling. I didn't get dizzy. I didn't get a headache. It wasn't painful. I didn't feel like I was being controlled, but I definitely felt new things in that because we were sharing a mind space. So there's a component there where I could actually feel him and his emotions, and he could feel mine. So it's a more, I hate to use the word intimate, but it's fitting, but it's not in a romantic sense, but more like it's more of a friendship that gets really close. In other words, you're sharing literally yourself, your inner self, or your soul or your spirit with that individual. That's what it felt like. Because from his side, I could feel the peace, the love, the care, the respect. And from me, unfortunately, he felt some of the same, but then he'd feel fear, and then he'd feel like my brain was going left and right and looking at things and thinking, what the heck is going on? So I was probably much more of a mess than he ever was.
Right. I mean, it's understandable. I mean, considering the circumstances, I mean, that's a typical human reaction.
Hmm.
And, it was interesting that the other guys on that team seemed to have possible missing time as well. I just don't remember like that incident.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So, there's definitely some time manipulation that occurs amongst all these testimonies.
yeah. I agree. Some of it, though, I would attribute to perhaps somebody injecting me with something to make me kind of go into a state of unconsciousness, or just kind of like twilighting you to do your colonoscopy. Twilight you so you don't remember anything, and then you come back and you don't remember really what happened.
Right.
Same thing here, where you just don't remember it.
Right. Yeah. Well, this has been fascinating. Thank you so much for joining us today. We really got into some deep stuff, which I really appreciate, hearing your insights and getting into the other stuff that you don't usually get to cover. So, is there anything else that we didn't touch on that you'd like to share before we wrap this up?
Yeah, as you know, I've been through some retribution from coming forward, and other whistleblowers the same thing. So I've got a fund I call First Hand Fund, that we're setting up. It's finally ready to go, and I wish that people would donate to that, because that fund is set up for is to help whistleblowers. I'd like to be the first generation of whistleblower to help the next generation of whistleblowers come forward, so that if they lose a job like I did, that it's not so difficult. We've got some money to help float them a little while, or help them to maybe deal with some PTSD that they might be going through, or they need legal help, or even if they want to go to Congress like I did, and whether they want to go public or not is up to them. We can do it on the down low too, and get them in discreetly. So that's what the fund would be for, is to help with all those kind of issues. And then we can expand on it later if we do get the funding. So I would just like to tell everybody, it's on my X account. I have it pinned right there. If you want to give to that account, or that First Hand Fund, it would really help out, and not just me, but there's a lot of other folks that need that help, because I've been through it, and I know there's a lot of people suffering and need the help.
Yeah. And what's your X handle, just for those who don't know?
It's just my at Jason T Sands, all one word. So it's just my first name, middle initial is T, and then my last name Sands.
Okay. And is that the only place people can find you primarily?
No, I'm on TikTok. I've got that. I do some Instagram, but I don't do a lot on that. I just did my first TikTok live show with some people in England over this past weekend, so that was kind of fun. and I think that'll be another outlet for me. So my main two ones though are X and probably going to become TikTok. So those are the two best places to get a hold of me.
Okay, great. And one last question I wanted to ask you earlier and I forgot. Did reptilians ever come into the picture? Did you ever hear about reptilians when you were in the
Yeah.
program?
Yeah, I didn't know much about them. Every time it happened, it was just like when I spoke about it at Joe Rogan, it's just like everybody wanted to hush up and they're like, nope, nope, don't want to go there. Can't talk about it here, kind of a thing. So for some reason, the reptilian presence is hush hush, even more so than I think a lot of other stuff. So I'm not sure why. Don't know whether it's because it's good, bad, or not. It's just something the way I heard it. But
Right.
but other people have had encounters with reptilians, and I would caveat the fact that there may be only like one type of reptilian that is actually bad and has a bloodlust that people have described in past. I'm not sure about that, but I've also heard from other experiencers and other people that have said that there's not just one type of reptilian. There seems to be a type of gray that has a scaly skin that gets mistaken as a reptilian, but it's a gray, and that there's two other types of reptilian races that are very benevolent and kind, and maybe even an amphibious race that also visits our planet, which also kind of resembles some reptilian features. So I would say to the audience and your listeners that, yeah, that's kind of what I'm going with right now, is I'm keeping an open mind.
Right.
But apparently there is some type of reptilian that is very hush hush inside the program.
Yeah, the Draco is what the information that's prevalent out there is that it's the Draco reptilian that have been in control of our planet for hundreds, if not thousands of years. And they're like the bad, regressive ones. Alex Collier talks about them all the time. A lot of other people talk about them. But like you said, there are benevolent ones as well. We've had at least two people on our show that have personally had contact with a benevolent race of reptilians, Ken Rolla and another individual. And they describe it as very enlightened, benevolent beings. So yeah, there are people that believe no, all reptilians are bad. Like that doesn't make any sense. That's like saying all humans on Earth are evil. You know, like well, no, there's the whole spectrum of range of like consciousness and types of people, right?
Yeah, I mean, think about how we as humans did that to each other. You know, whether it was blacks or whites, we all seem to have gone through a phase where, yeah, we've been quite cruel, even for religious reasons, not just slave trade kind of stuff, but you know, yeah, there's literally every race has been probably been through a slavery era, or at least servitude of some kind to another, you know, bunch of people. So yeah, that's a possibility that, yeah, every race kind of has its problems, I would think, because as soon as you get into millions and billions in any planet, yeah, you're going to have factions. You're going to have people that want certain things this way and not that way, and that's what you're seeing here on Earth. And I think that's kind of a microcosm for life anywhere else with intelligent life. Is they're probably going to have their own history, their own forms of government, their own societal culture, their own way of doing things, maybe even a greater propensity towards, you know, maybe what we think are more socialist ideals, as well as other people that have more freedom in other areas of their government. So yeah, it could. I think it's if you can imagine it, I think it exists out there. Let me put it that way.
Absolutely,
I think that's what we should be thinking.
I agree.
Yeah,
I couldn't agree more. Yeah. Yeah, this is fascinating. I could go on and on. Now I'm like thinking of other questions.
We could talk for hours.
Yeah, and I can come back to the show too later on, and you guys can think about it some more.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah. Yeah. So just for all the listeners out there, we'll put his links below in the description, but make sure you go check out his socials and give him a follow and, you know, support if you can, because we really appreciate what he's doing. And thank you guys all for tuning in. We can't do this without you. And we hope to see you at our conference in May. That ticket is, the information for those tickets are below, journeytotruth.online. And yeah, thanks again for joining us, Jason. This was a lot of fun. And yeah, I don't see why we wouldn't set up a part 2 in the future and, you know, get into some other stuff, because you know, this conversation is going to be ever evolving as disclosure just keeps happening. So there'll be nothing, you know, there'll be no shortage of things to talk about. So
yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Seems like every month there's some new topics.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Breaking news every day. So,
Right.
okay, well, we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. Thank you so much. Can't do this without you guys. Like I said, your support means everything. And you can follow us on all of our social media accounts too. We really appreciate that. So
I hope to see you at the conference.
Yeah, and we'll see you at the conference. Yeah, it's right around the corner. And until next time, have a great evening. Good night.